on schedule with the precision of an express train. With the last gangway down and the final moorings thrown off, the Queen Elizabeth is ready to sail. A signal from the bridge goes by telegraph to the distant engine room. With a roar of freedom from her mighty voice, the Queen stirs into life. Everybody seems to be on deck, waving to friends who have come to see them off. For sailing is a thrill, one of the many things about ocean travel that make folks say, getting there is half the fun. Swiftly as her mighty engines ease her into the river, the passing of the huge hull seems endless, for the Queen must move a fifth of a mile to pass a single point. As the giant liner clears the pier, her passengers feel the thrill of being really underway, while those ashore strive for a last envious glimpse of their lucky friends aboard. It's slow ahead as the ship moves down the Hudson River, a majestic sight indeed, for the Queen Elizabeth is 5 city blocks long, and her graceful hull and superstructure tower high above the water. Now we'll have time to catch our breath and learn to find our way around in this floating city, which will be our home for the next 4 days. It takes a little time to get acquainted, but it won't be hard, for there are clear direction signs on every hand to point the way. Handy deck plans show exactly where you are and make it easy for you to find your way about. 35 elevators serve the ship's 14 decks. One of the first things you may want to do is to visit the Purses Bureau, for this is the ship's business office where all the questions and details concerning your voyage may be handled. By radio or ship-to-shore telephone, you can keep in touch with any corner of the world. A Cunard passenger list is a veritable who's who of travel. You're sure to see names you know, perhaps someone from your own hometown. And you'll be delighted to discover the many unexpected personal services which make your travel easy and comfortable. For example, your favorite barber back home will find an able replacement here, while for the ladies, a perfectly equipped salon provides beauty service of every sort. Even while you're asleep at night, the service which makes your voyage pleasant goes on. The shoes you leave outside your door are meticulously shined and back in place again before morning. As you awake to your first full day at sea, you begin to appreciate the luxurious travel comforts that only an ocean liner can provide. And you find that deep slumber and salt sea air have put a keen edge on your appetite. While you breakfast, the Ocean Times, printed during the hours of the night, brings you all the news of the world which suddenly seems far away indeed. Yet with a telephone at your bedside, you can speak to any corner of the world, summon any service that you wish, or chat with your friends aboard. Later, on the Queen's broad decks, caressed by sunshine and salty winds, promenading becomes an exhilarating experience. And for perfect, carefree relaxation, what can compare to basking in a comfortable deck chair? The Queen Elizabeth has more than 3 acres of deck space for recreation. Here in cabin class, fresh air enthusiasts can relax in comfort and enjoy the moving panorama of the ocean and the sky. Here too, on the wide tourist class deck, there's plenty of room to take it easy in the sunshine. Part of the fun of being at sea is just doing nothing at all and making a record of those leisure hours to show the folks back home. Snapshots of newfound friends and new surroundings you'll never want to forget. Before you know it, it's time for lunch. Perhaps you'll choose the lovely veranda grill, high up on deck with window views of the sea, not only a favorite place for lunch, but later in the day, a gay spot for dinner, supper, and dancing. There's so much to see and do aboard a Queen that one trip just isn't time enough. Perhaps you'd like to go shopping. You can buy exquisite china figurines or handbags in your choice of finest leathers and modern fittings. There are English woolens, Scotch tweeds, and cashmere sweaters, and many other items of clothing and accessories for which Britain is known the world over. How about a few hours with a good book? The classics, travel, mystery. There is a well-stocked library in each of the ship's 3 classes with an experienced librarian in charge. Or in one of the many writing rooms, you can share your experiences by letter with your family and friends. You may like a quiet bit of competition with your fellow voyagers. Or if you enjoy more energetic play, the spacious decks provide for every kind of open-air fun. The big cabin class sports deck is one of the finest on the ship. And the tourist class sports deck, sheltered high amidships between the Queen's great funnels, offers plenty of room for healthful recreation. Of the many ocean-going games, quoits is one of the favorites. And of course, shuffleboard is the most popular of all. If you have even more energy to expend, and sea air gives you plenty, you'll want to take a workout in the gymnasium, equipped for every type of exercise and supervised by a trained physical instructor. During part of the day, there are private sessions for ladies, others for gentlemen, still others for the entire family. And after a workout like this, what could be more fun than a saltwater plunge in one of the big swimming pools? This cabin class pool on the Queen Elizabeth is one of the most beautiful on any ship and a popular gathering place especially for the younger generation. Nearby are complete facilities for Turkish baths, medicinal baths, and massage, all served by experienced attendants who here, as everywhere on the ship, are carefully trained for their particular service. A refreshing plunge like this puts you right in the mood for another age-old tradition of the sea, afternoon tea, served on the broad enclosed promenade deck with a bountiful assortment of the pastry chef's famous confections to tempt your appetite. Perhaps you'd prefer to have your tea in the beautiful main lounge with pleasant music as a background. One of 35 public rooms conveniently placed throughout the ship. The main lounge displays a magnificent portrait of the Queen Mother who launched this mighty ship and christened it with her own name, Elizabeth. The decoration of the main lounge includes many examples of exquisite inlaid marquetry panels, also used in many other parts of the ship. Adorning the great stairway between the promenade and the main deck squares is the largest marquetry panel in the world. Depicting the pilgrimage in Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, this unique work of art is an inlay of many rare woods in their natural colors. More than 50 varieties from many parts of the world were used in the decoration of the ship. Two shipboard motion picture theaters present selected feature films, often before they've had their premiere showing on land. Located aft on the promenade deck, this beautiful modern theater for first and cabin class passengers seats more than 300 people in luxurious comfort. Forward on the promenade deck is another favorite gathering place, the observation bar. Truly international in atmosphere, its expert bartenders can provide any refreshment you like. From the glens of Scotland and the vineyards of France, to exotic mixed drinks from the plantations of the Indies. Here's a rendezvous where you meet your friends in a sparkling atmosphere of companionship and relaxation. But all the gay gathering places on the Queen Elizabeth are not for grown-ups only. There are other spots strictly for youngsters, and what fun they have. One of them is this cabin class nursery, where mothers may leave their offspring with a nursery attendant especially trained in the care of children. Boys like the miniature captain's bridge, where they can play it running the ship to their heart's content. And on every voyage, all the youngsters have the time of their lives at the children's party, with goodies to eat, souvenirs, and brilliantly colored balloons to play with. It's a big event for the children, and as you can see, a thoroughly busy time for the capable stewards and nursery attendants in charge. Fortunately, there's a quiet retiring place in the smoking room for Dad, where he and his companions can relax and enjoy their favorite refreshments, liquid or otherwise. Here in the smoking room, there is a unique mural map, a panorama of the North Atlantic, which illustrates the route of the two great queens from Ambrose Lightship to Bishop's Rock. Tiny electrically driven models move across the map to show the positions of the two queens at every hour, day and night. And look, at this moment, they're almost together. Perhaps on deck, we might be lucky enough to witness the rare event of the two great ships passing within sight of each other in open sea. Yes, there she is. A few moments ago, a mere speck on the horizon. The Queen Mary speeds toward us, white foam curving from her prow. In another moment, these gigantic ships, two of the world's fastest, are passing each other at the combined speed of almost 70 miles an hour. The handling of 200,000 surging horsepower demands the utmost in training and experience. On this 83,000-ton vessel, the rudder alone weighs more than the Mayflower, which brought the Pilgrim Fathers across the sea to America. With all the miraculous instruments of modern navigation, including radar and electronic sounding devices, it still takes men raised in the finest tradition of the sea, to guide the Queen Elizabeth, largest moving structure in the world, across the far horizons of the North Atlantic. It still takes keen eyes high aloft in the crow's nest, just as it did in the days of sail, eyes that watch the sea ahead and scan the mighty ship herself, always alert for the safety of her passengers. All's well on the port side, and all is well to starboard. Passengers stroll the decks, secure in the knowledge that this gigantic ship is in good hands. The bright hours of the day fly swiftly until the last rays of sunset tint the sky, to usher in the glamour of the night. Following another old custom of the sea, most passengers, especially the ladies, look forward to a change of dress for dinner. If perfect dining is one of your special joys, dining aboard a Queen will be a happy memory indeed. As you enter the main restaurant, the buffet will give you an inkling of what awaits you. A taste-tingling sight when the appetite is sharpened by a day at sea.
Both east and westbound voyages called at Cherbourg, where passengers could continue their journey across Europe.
Cunard had had 10 glorious years. Between 1947 to 1957, they'd been the first big passenger ships back on the Atlantic. They'd sailed voyage after voyage, booked to capacity, and the Cunard thought they'd found the secret of perpetual wealth.
But in 1965, as passenger numbers fell as a result of travel by air, Cunard had to look for ways to make the Queens pay.
In April, I went up to Glasgow, where the Queen Elizabeth had been having a major overhaul to fit her out as a cruise ship rather than an Atlantic liner, which of course meant terrific obligation. Meant the ship had to be fully air-conditioned, whereas before she'd only been partially air-conditioned in the public rooms. She had to have many more rooms fitted with showers and toilets. She had to be fitted with a lido deck and swimming pool. But unfortunately, many of the ports selected for us were not suitable for us for winter cruises or even an autumn cruise around the Mediterranean.
When the announcement was made that RMS Queen Elizabeth was to be withdrawn from service, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth requested one last look over the liner.
She, of course, had launched the Queen Elizabeth in 1938, and she had a very close affectionate relationship for the ship. So before we sailed on her final voyage to America, she came down and spent a day on board, having lunch on board and going around the ship, meeting as many of the crew as possible. It proved to be a most exhilarating experience because she took such a keen personal interest in the ships.
Inevitably, the Queen Elizabeth was sold, destined to become an attraction berthed permanently in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. On the 28th of November 1968, she left Southampton for the last time.
It was rather like a cruise because we knew we had 12 days to cross the Atlantic, so we were able to go quite slowly and get down into the finer weather.
Manned by a skeleton crew of Cunard employees, the ship remained at the port which at this time had yet to be developed as a centre for cruising. Although the ship was open to the public, her purchasers went broke and she was sold by auction to shipping millionaire C.Y. Tung of Hong Kong. His dream was to convert the ship to a touring education centre, which he was to call the C.Y.'s University. But before starting this new career, the ship would have to meet stringent new fire and safety regulations.
Now my job in Lloyd's Register of Shipping was to try to update this vessel up to the 1966 requirements, which very basically means the enclosure of most of the stairways with fire structural bulkheads. Now these bulkheads included obviously fire doors and fire dampers. There's no point building a bulkhead if there's holes going through it. So this was all approved by Lloyd's Register of Shipping, by myself and by my colleagues.
Mr. Tung asked me if I would agree to become the nautical advisor to the Chinese Commodore Swan, who was to be in command of the ship. But in 1971, she'd been there for nearly 2 years. She'd been very neglected. The boilers had not been used at all, and the times the ship was, the lower parts of the ship had been flooded to settle her on the bottom when there was a threat of a hurricane crossing Florida. This water had stayed for had to be pumped out through separators, so it took a long time to clean her up. Then the boilers had to be, and it was eventually decided that she would sail for the voyage to Hong Kong with only 2 of the engines working, and one of the boiler rooms, and so that I pointed out that she had a Chinese crew who were new to the ship and had never sailed on a ship that size before. So I said, of course, if anything goes wrong on the business of getting her out of Port Everglades, she'll be the biggest cork in Port Everglades harbour that the world has ever seen. The following morning, Mr. C.Y. Tung rang me and said, "Oh, Commodore," he said, "please don't give any more interviews to the press." He said, "Since your speech last night, Lloyd's have doubled my premiums." In February 1971, we sailed with many adventures, but we did get out clear and began the slow voyage of the largest slow boat to China the world has ever seen. We eventually arrived in Hong Kong on July the 15th and handed the ship over, and I returned home.
Mr. Tung's dream started to take shape. 1,000 Chinese employees had the task of refurbishing the vessel. Lavish fittings, classrooms and laboratories were installed, with accommodation for 20 lecturers and 800 students. CY's University was to embark upon a 2-year world cruise.
During my visit to the vessel in December, apart from seeing the new Chinese decorated cabins, I also saw the large public rooms which had virtually been redecorated, including the gold leaf which had been fixed to the ceiling to replace the old stuff which had come off. The dining room was virtually finished. I have a slide to prove this. I was in the dining room. I also took slides of the fire insulation, of some dampers, I did not have any slides of the fire doors, unfortunately, but the actual doors were fully approved. There was nothing wrong with the doors. The fact that some were missing, that was accidental or perhaps deliberate, I don't know.
But at 11:30 on the 9th of January 1972, Mr. Tung's dream came to an end.
There was a lot of sort of anti-C.Y. Tung talk in the city. The fact that he had burnt the ship, he had torched the ship, as they say now, which I did not believe for one moment, because it was virtually finished. I also saw Mr. C.Y. Tung afterwards, who I knew personally, and his two sons, C.C. and I think C.H. And he was probably the most upset I've ever seen a Chinese man ever being, because he was actually crying for at least a week to 10 days afterwards.
My sea career, my connection with Cunard eventually came to a final end when the Queen Elizabeth caught, or the Seawise University as she then was, caught fire in Hong Kong Harbour.
The official inquiry which followed established at least 3 fires had started at once. The official verdict: sabotage by person or persons unknown.